Welcome back, students and seekers. We are here with our next stage of Who's Renewing My Church. I'm here with PD today to go on to this irregular series, and I forgot to turn my phone off, which is the ultimate thing. But this is live, so that's fun, right? Anywho, so for those of you that are wondering, hey, what happened to the regular counterculture? I had a final I was studying for the last 2 weeks, but I promise tomorrow morning. Which is another point. Now that we're in summer, I'll have a different schedule. So we might start doing Friday mornings for live streams, just so you know, because my teaching summer schedule ends. So I have a different schedule now. So let's launch into our irregular series, Who's Renewing My Church, where we talk about what can the younger generation, particularly junior and senior hires and young adults, do to help renew the church in light of what we've learned from Who Stole My Church. And real quick, I'll give my 3 points and then I'll hand it off to PD. Mine was one, reach up. You need to reach up to the older generation. And PD's going to give a lot better detail about this today. But even if some of them are punching down, you got to reach up, and we'll talk about what that means. 2 is you don't have to like it, but respect it. You don't have to like the old hymns, but you should respect them because they mean something to someone else. In the same way that your new worship music that brings you closer to God or reveres God, they should respect yours as well. Even if they don't like it, they don't have to like it. It's not about liking it at that point. It's about unity and worship. So respect them. And so those are the 2 biggie points I want to go over. But PD's going to kind of go over a little more detail about my point 1.
Yeah.
So
thanks for the invite, Mark, to join you here. I appreciate it.
Thanks for coming.
Mark calls me PD. My name's Dan Adams. I'm Pastor Dan, one of the pastors here at Parma Heights Baptist Church. For those who are watching and not connected here, for those who know me, it's good to have you here and to join us for this stream. I'm excited, in particular, to have an opportunity to respond to this book. This is the best book, but in part of discussing how we can apply this book, I think that's a good thought process for a project for us to meditate on a little bit. So Who Stole My Church? If I could generalize a couple of observations that I had from this book, and I think Mark's right in identifying that this book speaks more loudly and clearly to an older generation, but how do our younger generations respond, and what is a healthy way for us to move forward, I think is good for us to consider. So if I were to generalize here, a lot of the potential or even real life conflicts that are described in this book, Who Stole My Church, come from a couple of things that I've noticed in real life. That 2 generations, the older folks and the younger folks, often are at odds with one another, although they might not say it that way. And it happens very naturally. There's nothing new under the sun, but we're experiencing it in our day and age too, where the younger folks can easily disvalue the older generation simply because they think they're outdated and out of touch. And if they're outdated and out of touch, I have no time or place or need for your opinions, your music, your values, your lectures. That's an easy place to pigeonhole or dismiss an older generation, lack of appreciation of value. Conversely, it's very easy for an older generation to look down on a younger generation who hasn't earned it yet, who hasn't gone through enough life to really know what life is like. And some specific generalizations that I've observed are the older generation often sees the younger generation as, and can dismiss them because they're uncommitted, inexperienced, don't have the work ethic that they're looking for. Maybe they don't have the discipline that they have learned and come to appreciate. And so it's easy for an older generation to dismiss this younger generation. Within the body of Christ, we ought to have unity, a love and appreciation for one another. And so we have to find a way to bridge this gap of dismissiveness and lack of value and understanding and appreciation for one another. One of the best bridges that I have experienced between this generation gap, where we don't appreciate and value and understand one another, comes from being willing to serve side by side with one another. So if I were to say there is one thing that we can pursue, Mark, you were talking about reaching up.
Mm-hmm.
I would say we need to bridge through serving. I think I'd add that to something that we want to work toward. Let me describe what I mean first, and then I want to show you a couple of examples. When we try to simply convince ourselves in our mind, appreciate somebody, maybe we can do that. Maybe we can convince ourselves mentally. But experientially, if we pursue serving one another, I think a natural byproduct of that will be a love and appreciation and a value for one another, especially when we do that in the context of multi-generational service. So as an example, many years ago, I had an opportunity to go with a buddy of mine down to Tennessee. He said, "Hey, you want to go on a road trip?" Yep, I'm in. That sounds awesome. We're going to get away for several days and just explore. Sounds great. I'm in. Sign me up. What are we going to do? Well, we're going to go to my grandma's house and we're going to dredge the pond. I said, "What?" I'd never done such a thing before. That's not how I want to spend my vacation time as a college student. But my friend Ben, he and I were buddies. I'd do anything for him. I knew he'd do anything for me. Road trip. Sign me up. We went.
Sure.
The part that I was not most interested in, I was loving the road trip and I was loving the exploring the back roads of down south. But what I did not appreciate was getting into the muck and mire of a pond. Not my favorite thing to do. If you ever go to the beach and it's nice and sandy, love it. If you ever go to an unmanicured beach and you walk into the lake and it's just muddy and slimy and seaweedy and you sink down mid-shin, that was what it was like. And then we were clearing the pond. Grandma was looking to sell her home. I don't remember all the details. I was just along for the ride, but I got to spend the next several days working alongside my buddy Ben. We were college age at that time, and his grandma, who was trying to get her place ready to sell. She was near the end of life. I would never have had any reason to hang out with Ben's grandma or to connect with her or have any appreciation for who she was and her lifestyle. And it was definitely backwards compared to my experience. But through spending a couple of days doing some hard service together, Ben and I have a lot of shared experiences, memories, and stories because of that. But I also got to learn to appreciate Ben's grandma, who I never would have ever had any kind of reason to love. I
think you would, the stuff you might not have gleaned, that the idea that you wouldn't have ever expected to learn anything from this person.
Correct.
And that's the same, I think, with you. When you're younger, you think, well, what is this septuagenarian, this 78-year-old, what do they know about what's going on now? Well, maybe they don't know exactly your life circumstances, but that doesn't mean that they can't teach you something good, necessary. So,
yeah, I saw that here more recently, just a month or so ago, in preparation for it's summer now, but we were trying to get the campus here at church ready for the summer ministries. And so our property management team had a work day here at the church, and a number of our teens from our student ministry, several young adults from our young adult ministry, and quite a few retirees were out here on the property doing a variety of chores, edging the sidewalks and picking up sticks and garbage and weeding in the flower beds. You'd probably rarely see those generations serving side by side, but because of that, because they were willing to come together for a single purpose to serve, they were working side by side, they were serving together, they were laughing and joking and telling stories and getting to know each other. And so the community was being built because they came together to serve. I think if you try to pursue community, sometimes you can get it. If you try to pursue mutual appreciation for the sake of that, you can get there, but it's hard work. But a shortcut to that, to bridge that generation gap, is to serve side by side. And a natural byproduct of that is the community that's being built, a love and appreciation for each other. Just think of some of the barriers that were there that I described. If an older generation looks at a younger generation as undisciplined, not having any kind of work ethic, not having a direction or purpose in life, and I hear and see those things, boy, what a better way to prove them wrong, by showing up and serving side by side with them, saying, hey, I'm willing to roll up my sleeves and I'm willing to get a little bit dirty to serve side by side with you. Their value and appreciation for you may begin to change. And likewise, when you may have thought that they were out of date and out of touch, all of a sudden you're hearing some of their stories and getting to know their personality before you even had a chance to dismiss them, and all of a sudden say, hey, these are some really cool people. And a community gets to be built there. I did want to share a passage of scripture too, as a matter of fact. The Gospel of Mark tells this interesting story. I think it'll tie in. We'll see. Mark chapter 10, there's this interaction that Jesus has with his disciples. James and John, I'm looking at Mark chapter 10, beginning in verse 35. I'm not going to read all of it, summarize some of it. In verse 35, we read, and James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came up to him, that's Jesus, and said to him, Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you. Well, first of all, that's an odd way to start a conversation with a buddy, I suppose, is, hey, would you write me a blank check? Jesus says, what do you want me to do for you? And they say, grant us to sit one at your right hand and one at your left hand in your glory. James and John come to Jesus and say, we want the place of honor. We want to be first and second place. We want to be right there with you. We want to be first. We want it our way. We want our best interests in mind, and all of the attitude that comes with it. I think that's very natural. I mean, that's a natural human response, is to want the best for us and for our people, I suppose. Something interesting, Jesus pushes back, obviously. He says, you don't know what you're asking. You can't drink the cup that I'm going to have. Something interesting, when the other 10 disciples hear about this, verse 41, and when they heard about it, they began to be indignant at James and John. And Jesus called all of them to him. So now the other 10 hear that James and John are trying to be first, and the other 10 are like, hey, that's not fair. What about us? Now, I'm going to extrapolate here for a second. Too many times in the church, it's easy for us to say, hey, my group right here, we want what's best. And to do that in a way that's dismissive of the other, whether it's the minority or the majority. I don't think that's the point I'm trying to make. It's me and mine need to be number one and get the best. So whatever that preference is, the easiest low-hanging fruit to pick on is worship styles. You know, my group, my clan, we want to have our style of worship. Well, what happens when the other 10 hear about that? They feel like they're at best second place. They feel at best that they've been dismissed or devalued. And Jesus's response is really interesting. He says in verse 42, he says, you know that those who are considered rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and the great ones exercise authority over them. But it shall not be so among you. But whoever would be great among you must be your servant. And whoever would be first among you must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom from many. So what Jesus offers as an antidote to this me first, I want me and mine to be number one, his antidote for that is to say, instead of trying to put yourself first and get your way and your preference, choose to serve. Put your agenda aside and choose to serve. I'll tell you, when you choose to serve, you're immediately being like Jesus, because that's what he came to do. He came to serve. All right. One other thing that I wanted to share with you. It's probably a familiar passage to you if you've been around the Bible much. It comes from Philippians chapter 2. Just a reminder that we need to value others. Verses 1 through, I think, 4 or 5. So if there is any encouragement in Christ, any comfort from love, any participation in the Spirit, any affection and sympathy, complete my joy by being of the same mind, having the same love, being in full accord and of one mind. Paul says, if we want to seek having his joy be complete, at least to the people then that he was writing to, he says, be united, be of one. Don't try to be above. Don't try to have this competition that my values and my preferences are number one. Instead, he says, having the same love, being in full accord, and of one mind. And then he goes on to say, do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. Let each of you look not only to his own interests, but also to the interests of others. Now, there's a time and place to have a conversation about what's most strategic in the church and what preferences appeal to people so that we can draw them in. There's a time and a place for that conversation. But the instruction from Paul to the church in Philippians chapter 2 is set your own personal agendas and interests aside and in humility, look to serve and value the others, whoever they are, above yourself. I'll tell you, a lot of arguments, a lot of factions, a lot of divisions in the church would never happen if we simply valued the other person more than we valued our own agendas and interests and strategies and whatever else we want to see accomplished. So that's not a solution to all of it, but I'll tell you, if we in humility value others more than ourselves and seek to serve rather than put ourselves in a place of position, we're going to begin to bridge the gap that the book Who Stole My Church really brings out. And I'd encourage you, if you're listening to this, to consider ways. Where's a place that you can serve, especially in a place that's multi-generational? Look for a place to serve so that you can put yourself out there and an older generation can see your work ethic and your discipline and your love to serve the Lord in practical ways. And a byproduct of that is you'll get a chance to meet them, to know them, and to hopefully bridge that gap to learn to value them. And humility comes along with that. I mean, we have to humble ourselves to put ourselves in that place. One other resource, and Mark may link this in the bio below, in the comments below. You can check this out. There's an interesting book. If you're wanting to know how can we be strategic in reaching young people within the church, it also has some very practical ways that we, especially as a younger generation, can be better connected within the church. The chapter on multi-generational ministry is particularly interesting. If you only read one chapter, I'd point
that issue today specifically, but the heart of that verse is that Jesus came to bring these divisions together. And consider that when we are serving Christ, when we're focused on Christ, those divisions kind of melt away. And I see that when I serve with Power Ministry.